What's going on, Savage Nation? Welcome to the second installment of the Savage Talk podcast. And this is our opportunity to get you guys caught up with what is relevant within the Savage sphere, what's going on in this Savage Nation of ours. And today we're going to be digging into powerlifting. I want to talk to you guys and fill you in for those of you guys that are curious on an athlete of ours that recently just competed in her third ever USPA Powerlifting meet. That was this past Saturday. So we're going to get you caught up with that, but also I want to use this opportunity while our attention is towards strength to discuss strength in general and some of the questions that have been coming up recently and that really have just kind of popped up on our radar. So let's get started with Sarah. For those of you guys that don't know, Sarah is a client. She's been a coaching client of ours for some time now. I've worked with her personally. Actually, she started working with my wife. Some of you guys probably didn't even know that my wife is also a certified trainer. She is a middle school coach as well and a teacher. But she actually was working with us, picking up some clients over the summertime, and started with Sarah as she started to transition into the school year, and as Sarah started to adopt this, this goal of doing another powerlifting event. Because when she got started, it wasn't necessarily that. She just wanted to get back into the gym and really just start working on, just getting in the routine again. Now, my wife doesn't have much experience with powerlifters, and I'm not even going to pretend like I have a ton of experience with powerlifters, but because I teach this stuff and, am a little bit more versed, I've been in the industry for some time, it made more sense to do the lateral move where I would kind of take over the plan, as well as the fact that she's actually getting ready for school. And so, we started working on our journey to getting Sarah ready for her third powerlifting meet. And I was really excited. When we got started, I was super pumped about it because this gave me an opportunity to work with a very specific type of client that we haven't, at least with Savage Coaching, we haven't worked with yet. And I wanted to really put to the test a program that we had been working on called Savage Strength. So within Savage Coaching, we have multiple different types of plans. We want to really cater to all goal types, whether you are looking for performance in Olympic weightlifting, strength in powerlifting, you want to get faster, you want to do kind of variations of that, aesthetic change. And so we have these different programs, and I don't want to sit here and say that they're cookie cutter because, Savage Strength, for instance, is really a particular program that we have put in place that is designed for powerlifters, but even within our programs, we are still making very individual modifications to fit the client themselves. So, we use, again, a template, if you will, of saying, here's how strength looks, but it's not exactly just cut and dry, because where Sarah might have a sticking point or where, somebody might have a weakness that's different than hers, we have to make adaptations within there. But Savage Strength is really one of those skeleton structures that I put together that I was really excited to kind of put to the test with a specific athlete that fit this build. And so we did it, and we, painstakingly got through our hypertrophy block, which she's no powerlifter. I'm not even going to just say her. No powerlifter is a big fan of hypertrophy blocks because they're typically a little bit more volume heavy. And our running joke is that powerlifters, anything above 6 reps is cardio. And so anyway, we get through this programming. And, it was really awesome. We saw some mechanical things that were right off the bat that we started working on and fixing that really made dynamic changes in her lifts and really started to kind of, pay tribute into more strength right away. That's one of the topics I want to get into after we get you updated on Sarah is mechanical proficiency and central nervous system adaptation and stuff like that. But anyway, we get through training and we were just seeing these big chunks of progress. Now look, Sarah, this is her third meet, okay? So she's not necessarily new to this. However, a lot of people, I think, underappreciate what the newbie or the beginner, bubble looks like, because it's a lot more broad than you might think. Like there are plenty of people that go to the gym that think, their experience because they've been going to the gym for some time. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they've really dug into the weeds of some of these technical things or, really sliced it and diced it up a little bit more than what they could have been. And so a lot of times I think you can really peel back a layer of the onion and find that there's more beginner kind of exposed skin than you might think. And that was the case with Sarah. And so we were able to actually, and I'm going to say in gym PR. So there's a difference between gym PRs and our meet PR. All right. We want to separate those two things. But in the gym, we were able to actually collectively put on 50 plus pounds on each and every one of her lifts greater than her last meet. And so what that means is like we actually added 150 plus pounds to her total, which anybody that's done strength sports or powerlifting or something like that, that's incredible. That's amazing to see that. So our personal bests, by the time we were at the very end of our peaking block with the program, I think in the gym, we hit a squat that was around 355 or so. It might have been 365. Don't specifically quote me on that. We hit a bench press of 195, and I think that was a solid RPE. 8.5, I think we were still sub 9. Now, we did attempt a 200, I believe it was, or it might have been a 205, and we had a failed attempt, which I hate to do. I do not like to see anybody hitting a 10 RPE that's training for an event like this. It's just something we're avoiding like the plague. But so we weren't able to get over 200, but we hit that 195 very clean. And then on the deadlift, I believe we hit a 385 deadlift, which was pretty incredible. Along the journey, we had some hiccups. I think our squat, we really were having to work on depth. We also had to change the bar positioning on Sarah's back. That was a big change that we made. A lot of people underappreciate the mechanics of an individual, and Sarah specifically, she's a tall lady. So for a female athlete, she is tall. She's like my height, 5'9". And not only is she tall, but her hips are very, very high. That means that she has really long femurs. And so typically you'll see kind of a shorter, maybe boxier torso with high hips and long femurs. And what this is what's happening is, if you can imagine the femur, because of the length of it, there's only so much mobility whenever you start to fall into flexion. So as you're coming down in the squat, you're falling into flexion. And there's only so much room there to the pelvis that can move without starting to kind of pull the hips down or doing this kind of posterior pelvic tilt. And so this is something that we ran into as a mobility issue. Now, she was attempting to high bar squat, and I don't know how long she had been doing this, but high bar squat meaning she's squatting with the bar really high up on her traps. Now, what this is doing is it's vertically loading you. So if you're able to have the mechanics with people with shorter legs, shorter femurs, they can sit really up and down, a lot like an Olympic weightlifter. Imagine a front squat. You're in a very up and down position. These folks, a high bar position actually is really good for them. It makes sense. Now, low bar, this is lower on the trap, so think right across the posterior deltoid. But this allows you leverage to allow your torso to fall forward more and still have kind of the mechanical proficiency under the bar. And so we switched up that low bar position, which we were a little worried about in the beginning, but we found that it made huge dings in our ability to mechanically go through the movement and get stronger right away. So I think I pay a lot of the strength benefits to that kind of technical change. Now, this doesn't change the fact that depth still was somewhat of an issue of us. We also got her to start wearing lifters, and lifters are the elevated heel shoe. So she was used to not ever wearing her lifters. She was always in Chucks or some sort of flat bottom tennis shoe, which isn't really a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot of people that use that, but I noticed with her mobility, it just made more sense for her to have that elevated heel as long as she gets used to it. So a little bit tricky kind of getting her used to it, but once we did, it definitely helped out a lot too. So anyway, that was kind of our squat work through. On the bench press, I think the bench press is where we saw the most kind of like surprising progress. Not to underappreciate her abilities, but women in general have a hard time with the bench press. And if you go to a powerlifting meet, you will see the most variability on weight with the bench press. You could look at the size of an individual and kind of predict their deadlift or their squat in a lot of cases with ladies, but with the bench press, it's all over the map. And this was also Sarah's hardest lift. This is her weakest lift. And so we were able to really, make a lot of progress on this. A lot of that, I think I contribute to, focusing on block presses a lot was really important. I think the tempo presses that we did in our auxiliary movements really helped out quite a bit. And then just getting her to be conscious of, loading her hands with kind of an external rotation from the wrist so that those lats kind of engage and you're going to keep that straight bar path if possible. So she was able to see lots and lots of progress on the bench press. On the deadlift, our biggest hang up, outside of one little inkling of a day where she decided that she could not grip the bar anymore. There's one day that just out of nowhere, 315, she just couldn't hold on to, which was very strange, but that was a fluke. Our biggest thing with the deadlift is that she actually, and we tried two different things. It was funny how it worked out because we really made a big change like right there at the end. At first, we just could not figure out what it was going to take to get her to make this one fluid movement. It seemed that she would break the floor just fine. She would get the bar moving fast, but then right at the mid-thigh or upper to mid-thigh, there would be like this secondary kind of like hitching movement where she couldn't seem to just connect the dots, could not seem to just complete the movement. And if she did, it was just broken up, and it looked like it was broken up into pieces, which they will, hit you for hitching is what they call it in powerlifting. So we need to iron that out. Think of it like a wrinkle that we needed to iron out. And so one of our first changes was that we got her to start dropping her hips, because I want you to think about like the distance of your shins from the bar. Now, most of the time, what we're taught, and this makes sense for most people, is to actually crowd the bar on a deadlift. So to try to make contact with your shins on the deadlift, and that's to give you the most mechanical advantage. If you think where you end the movement, this is right up against your thighs. And so therefore, starting the movement as close to the body as possible is going to give you that kind of straight bar path. Now, the issue is do you have enough of the mechanics to allow your knees to be out of the way, or to allow your hips in a position that you can have as much leverage to move the weight as possible. So with her, due to those long femurs and the shorter lower legs, she also has very small feet. By crowding the bar, we had two options. One option was we needed to drop, and this is what we started with, is we need to drop her hips down lower than what I normally would do for the average person deadlifting. Normally what I would do is I would have somebody a little bit more over the top of the bar. And then we're talking traditional deadlifts. I'm not talking like Olympic lifting deadlifts. For Olympic lifters, you'll see them sit really low in almost like a deep squat position as they start the movement, because they have to continue through this upward powerful kind of ballistic nature. Whereas a deadlift is going to end at the mid-thigh. And so what we want is we want the torso to be over the top of the bar. And so the hips are going to start from a higher position than where you would, say, end your squat. Now, we started having her drop her hips down almost like she was Olympic lifting, and we found that was actually pretty successful. She was stronger that way. But as the weight started progressing, we still had that little ironed out issue. And so, we tried baby powder, of course, which is always going to help because she's a larger person. And so getting stuck and kind of grinding on that upper thigh is going to be an issue. So it just could be friction, right? And that definitely helps. But to me, there was something else mechanically going on. And so right there at the end of our prep, we tried something where we basically had her step away from the bar. And so again, going back to kind of the way the Olympic lifter would do it, is they wouldn't crowd the bar with completely up against their shins, because it doesn't give them enough room to get past the knees if they sit so low. So they might start over the top of the laces of the shoe. Well, I wanted her to try that. And so we started with, the bar over the top of the laces of the shoe. So she was away from had a good amount of distance from her and the bar. But then we tried sitting our hips back like we had been doing, and we found that those two things didn't really go hand in hand with her. She needed to actually be over the top of the bar like a traditional deadlift, but in addition, separate the bar. And that really was our winning recipe to kind of bringing it all together. And so that's where we landed. And it really worked out for us. We, like I said, we hit a 385, I think, pretty clean in the gym. So those are our gym PRs. Going back, we had the squat that we hit a 355, I believe it was, bench press at 195 and a 385. So this really set the tone of what we think we were capable of. Now, when you're going into a meet, all right, you get 3 attempts and everything. And so this is strategy, right? You have to come in there and you've got to think, I've got 3 attempts. How do I really play this? You don't want to come out and shoot for your personal best in the gym. That would be irresponsible, because if you miss it, it's a totally different environment, it's a totally different day, and you miss it, you cannot actually go backwards with the amount of weight. If I tell them put 385 on our deadlifts, I can't choose to go backwards, I can only go forward. And so, it's a bad situation. We even saw a kid there who his opener squat was way too heavy for him. And it's painful to watch because he has to go and get under it 3 times, or an additional 2 times after that first fail, knowing that he's not going to get it. And so anyway, so we want to put on conservative numbers, and Sarah and I deliberated with this back and forth, what we landed on. And I fought her on the deadlift, on the squat. But she ended up winning. So it goes squat, bench, deadlift. This is what the day looks like. So opening up with squat, she wanted to open with 295. Now, mind you, we did 355. I felt like 315 should have been our opener, and I was pretty firm about that. But she really was scared about the squat. She didn't want to, go shorten her distance. She wanted to make sure she got low enough and really just kind of put numbers on the board. And so I thought, hey, you know what? Let's do 295. And that could have been a good decision. I think we both agree that was probably the right thing to do, but we also might have been able to get 315 still. So with the 295, the one thing that my compromise there was say, okay, if we do 295, that means we need one big jump though from the first to the second attempt. Then we'll be more conservative on the third attempt. So we actually jumped 40 pounds up to, and all of it's kilo conversions. So this is not, I'm just going to give it to you in pounds. It's easier that way. But essentially we went from the whatever the closest to the 295 was, we bumped up to the closest to 335. So 335 would have been a 40-pound jump here. And she went up to it, moved the bar like it was nothing, right? I mean, it was, smoked it. There was no level of, that being too heavy for her at all. But she rushed it a little. So she got a little excited and she rushed it. And I think on that second attempt, she definitely did not get low enough. And we knew it. So as soon as she got the 2 red lights on the side, the 1 white in the middle, I went and talked with her. We discussed it. It wasn't heavy, so we felt comfortable going ahead and moving up to the next 350. So from 335 to 350, more conservative jump than our first jump. But the weight wasn't an issue. We just needed to make sure that she committed to burying that weight. You've got to go in and you've got to bury that weight and commit to the depth. And so she went up to it, and she did. On that third attempt, here's my thing on it. They ended up giving her the red lights on the side, calling her for depth again. But I want to make this very clear. I actually take fault in this because I think she went up looking at that deadlift. I've gone in slow motion back and forth. I filmed it. I genuinely feel like she did exactly what I wanted her to do. It's exactly the way we trained. I felt like it was at the depth that I wanted. And so if anything, if I would have known that they were trying to get more of an Olympic depth squat, if they were being harder on that, I would have changed our training mechanism a little bit so that she was more proficient at it. And to kind of unpack that a little bit, for those of you guys that don't know, there's a difference between, just because you're training somebody to squat, it's not always, equivalent. Whereas an Olympic lifter needs to really get good at catching a squat in a very, very low, like below parallel, like ass to grass position. That's because it's actually the most mechanically sound for them. To be able to receive 400 pounds on a clean, you need to be able to dive for it and catch it down there. Now, a power lifter, it's a little different because the goal is to complete the lift with as much weight as possible. And so, yes, you could drop below parallel, and some of you hypertrophy, I'm trying to build legs crowd, you're all about ass to grass squats, and that's great, but it's also, there's a diminishing return where it takes away from our ability to move more weight if we are training to go crazy low. So we want to break, below parallel, but we don't actually want to go ass to grass because that's just not going to be the most technically proficient for us. And so I trained her whereas I think a powerlifter should be trained. And depending on the organization, depending on the judging, this can change, but I feel like that right below kind of parallel where you see that little bit of hip crease and that downward crease from the knee, I think that's where powerlifting typically is judged. And I had quite a bit of people, kind of looking over our shoulder and agreeing. So I take fault to this. She got called in her height. I'm not a big fan of that because I felt like she moved the weight super fast. But it is what it is. So we ended up just getting our opener, which was a little bit of a blow to us. I think that she obviously, was being hard on herself about it. It had nothing to do with her. She did exactly what she needed to do. So I was very happy. But the reason it was a kind of a statistical blow to us is because at this meet, we had a couple of ladies that were very competitive in the super heavyweight class. One of them, we felt confident going in that if we were gonna compete with her, if we were gonna even come close to what her total is gonna be, we were gonna have to be at our best and miss nothing. We were gonna have to hit every number to a T, and even maybe hope that she misses one of our attempts. And so we already kind of assumed that we were taking a second place at least. But the other girl, we were battling it out back and forth, and so with this 295, that kind of set us back because you got to think we easily could have had another 50 pounds on that lift that we didn't get credited. And so that, is going to take away from our total. But that also means we need to be a little bit more aggressive possibly on our other two lifts. So going into the bench press, we're warming up and I noticed she is just smoking weight on the bench press. And I've seen this before with her. And sometimes as a coach, you've got to be a little intuitive, right? This is one of the reasons we use RPE actually is intuition in the gym. There's so many variables that play into your performance that we have to be on our toes. And I noticed in the warm-up, she's just making everything look easy, right? The 135, she might as well have tossed it up in the air. We put on, our first attempt was 175. We put that weight on the bar and it looked like effortless. Right? Hulk smash. And so I've seen this with her in the gym before where she just gets in this streak of invincibility. And I thought, all right, we got to exploit this, right? We got to take advantage of this. So remember, our personal best in the gym was 195. If we got that, we would be happy. So we opened at 175, put the numbers on the board, easy, no problem. She smoked it. The second attempt, we went ahead and decided, fuck it, let's go right to that 195. Let's go to what we want. That'll give us a third attempt where we can be aggressive. And I had no doubt in my mind she's getting this. So I think the kilo conversion was 192. She smoked it. Put it on the board. So now we have what we expected on the bench press. I'm like, all right, Sarah, this is where in public you actually put on over 200 pounds on the bench press, which you've never done before. It's a huge milestone for her, and you do it in front of everybody. And so we put on, I think it worked out to 202 or something like that in kilos. Put on 202. She got the lift. Incredible moment, man. I just was ecstatic. She got the lift. She grinded on it a little bit. It was a struggle, but man, she got it. Now, she ended up getting 2 red lights. The reason she got the red lights is there was a minor downward movement of the bar. So there can't be any sort of downward movement of the bar. It has to all be going forward, or all be going up, I should say. And the reason the bar moved down when I reviewed the footage is, if you've ever been in this position where as you're pressing up, it starts to get difficult, some people want to compensate with one side of their shoulder, and it's natural, right? Like you got that strong shoulder that tries to push through and you kind of jimmy your way into a mechanical position. Well, that started to happen. And so when one side, say your left side, starts to go up, well, naturally the right side can easily have this almost like downward movement, like flutter. And so there was this minor little flutter, but she got the lift without any spotters touching it. She did it. And we videoed it, like to me, regardless if we counted that, even though they didn't count that, it wasn't a meet number. We just did over 200 pounds in front of everybody at a USPA meet. And that's just an incredible moment. So I was very proud of her. So now going into deadlifts, she's still looking strong. We had a weird instance where we're warming up and every girl in our flight was noticing this. But there was like this kind of shitty training bar or something that we were using that just made everything feel like it was heavy. And I can't explain it, but there was just something up with this bar we were using. So we put on like 300 pounds, and Sarah never does this, by the way, ever. She looks at me, she's like, that felt heavier than I expected. I'm not going to lie. And I'm not used to her saying that. And most of the time, even if it does feel heavy, she's pretty good, I think, about hiding the truth. Like she comes at things with confidence, and I think that's the way she wins. But to hear her say that, I'm like, oh man, what is going on? Like, do we need to worry about this? So we went ahead and stuck with our 315 opener. I felt confident that this was going to be no problem. I was hoping that it was the bar, and sure enough, it was the bar, because when she got up there, and every girl said the same thing. She moved that 315 like I'd say 5 times as fast and easy as she did the 300 in warm up. And so I was like, all right, cool. We're feeling good about this. 315 moved quick. Let's go ahead and jump up to our second attempt is going to be, I want to say we went, God, what was it? Was it 355 maybe? We had a pretty aggressive jump, I remember. I think it was 355. And she got it, no problem, no hitching, none of that stuff that we were talking about. Good to go. Third attempt. She told me when we walked up there, you have like 60 seconds to change your numbers to what's your next attempt. You've got to do it pretty quickly. And we're trying to do these kilo conversions, I wanted her to be more aggressive, but she said, I really want to get all 3 attempts. Like, I just want to be able to put all the numbers on the board. And so we decided to go 370, which is 15 or so pounds under what our personal best is. And considering she was moving the weight so well, I felt like it's going to be no problem. So we went ahead and went 370. At this point, now we put baby powder on her thighs, right? And the issue is baby powder is very messy. And so typically they have like a baby powder station or somewhere that you can do it, because you don't want it just everywhere lifters are choking and stuff like that. And this gym's just packed. Well, our station did not have a baby powder section. So she had to go outside before this lift to actually do it, even though the guys' platform had one. And so by this point, it kind of had worn off. And I don't think either of us were really even thinking about it. And the flight's moving pretty quickly in the deadlift. And so she went up there, and she got the lift, completed the lift, but they called her for that hitching movement that we were trying to iron out. And so, I need to go back and look at it. The first thing, as soon as she put the bar down, there was a judge like behind me that like looked at me, and he goes, "Hey man, she needs baby powder on her thighs." Like, he knew that was the first thing that he said, is like she would have got that essentially if we would have had more baby powder on us. So could have been that. It could have been, something that maybe she defaulted to. I don't know. She still moved the weight, what looked to be relatively easy to me. But where did we end up? We ended up with a squat of 295, probably our more disappointed one, but 295, still got it, still a meet PR for her. And we ended up with a bench press of 192 pounds. And then we did a deadlift somewhere, it's like 350 something. This ended up getting us 3rd place at the meet. So I'm overall happy. Everything that she opened with, every number she put on the board was a personal best at a meet for her. We've also seen her in the gym hit lots of personal bests. And it was just a great experience. Now, she was hard on herself, because every great athlete expects the most out of themselves. And I get that. You know what I mean? Like, I totally get that. But as the coach, keeping it objective, you just really have to look at this as a huge win. And so I'm just really impressed with her. She has plans now of actually doing another meet, and she actually wants to go and chase after the girl that I was mentioning that is the really strong one that we were already skeptical of whether or not we're even competitive with, but she wants to come after her. And I think that that's very exciting for me. I love seeing that competitive nature in her. I love that she is 2 days outside of this meet and already thinking like, all right, time to get better. God, that just gets me fucking pumped. So it's an amazing thing. All right, so I know I've been rambling a little bit, but hey, these podcasts can get longer. I want to spend this last few minutes on the podcast talking about strength in general. Now, this has been a cool experience going through this. I love working with performance athletes. I like the objectivity of it. I like sometimes even the linear progression cycles that you can go through. It just with aesthetic clients, that is definitely probably where my past experience really I have most of success with is extreme transformations, muscle development, fat loss, bodybuilders, bikini transformations, and I love that world. I do, and I like that it's a difficult world. With that said, there's so much nuance to it. There's so much nuance that it's difficult because it's a lot more like painting than doing an algorithm, whereas strength, we can look at this and really kind of technically break it down. We can start to, dissect this in a way that is cool and measurable. And so that's something that I've really, really enjoyed with this kind of prep. Whereas normally, with aesthetics, it's like you're making dietary changes and you're making, all of it is strategy, but it's a little bit more kind of intuitive strategy. It's us saying like, well, yeah, I can see how this might make sense, and so let's kind of move this dial a little bit and see what happens. And this has been a little bit more like, oh, wow, like I see what your hips are doing, and I see how this is this, and how we could actually have more of an advantage if we just change this. So that's been good. That leads me to talking to you guys about what I think, and I did a video on this that's already posted if you want to check that out. But I want to talk to you guys about, strength in general. If you want to get strong, one of the most underappreciated concepts of strength is the skill itself. It's the skill of being strong. Now, I know that a lot of people attach themselves emotionally to the idea that big muscles mean strength, or, they think that it's about making the movement as difficult as possible. That's the most impressive, right? For instance, take it like this, like a strict pull-up versus a kipping pull-up. That's one of the most common things. And, the idea is that, it's not respected because you're taking this mechanical advantage with the kipping pull-up, that a true pull-up is strict. And I get where that comes from, but you also have to realize that these are two different realms of ideas. These are two different ways of approaching something. One is for the sake of proficiency. It's for the sake of mechanical advantage. It's for the sake of moving something from point A to point B the most proficiently as possible. Whereas the other one is about muscular overload. It's about, trying to be mechanically inefficient so that you can stimulate, say, muscle growth or something like that. Now, powerlifting is unique because we see a crossover. It's not as obvious, a stark example of like kipping pull-ups and strict pull-ups. Whereas powerlifting strength, bench press, squat, deadlifts, we see this really trickle into the world of bodybuilding and aesthetics all the time. We see, both groups doing these movements. But I think what a lot of bodybuilders or a lot of aesthetic or even general pop folks don't appreciate about and what they could learn from a powerlifter in these movements is just becoming more of a technician. It's becoming more proficient at the skill itself. When you go to bench press, there are lots of different ways to do the bench press. There's a lot of ways to fuck up the bench press. And so you've really got to take a step back and you've got to see, like, am I leveraging, say, the floor correctly? Am I positioned on the bench in a way that my glutes are firing, and am I loading the antagonists, my lats, my mid traps, my rhomboids, my posterior deltoids? Am I activated all the way through? There are all these little, nuances, little technical appreciations for the movement itself that can be looked at. And my biggest issue is that a lot of people aren't thinking that when they're thinking strength. They're thinking, well, I've got to get bigger, so add more weight. Or maybe they don't even care about being bigger. They just think that being strong is about adding more weight. And obviously, adding weight is how we measure strength. But if you are continuing to change the tires in an out-of-a-line car, you are missing the forest for the trees. You are asking for failure. We can teach ourselves how to do bad habits. We can get really good at proficiently doing things the wrong way. Like habits are something, these kind of autonomic responses to how we do something is really has to be, put higher on a pedestal whenever we're talking about performance. If you want to get good at a bench press, slow down, take the weight off, and start really getting precise about your movement. Get good at hitting the depth or with that pause or with the leveraging from the hands or using your feet or your glutes, or like get all of that down and start building on that foundation. Even if that means that you have, like right now, let's say that you bench press really high on the chest, like I see a lot of bros doing, and you just kind of have this rushed, just traditional Gold's Gym bench press thing going on that inevitably leads to, torn supraspinatus or something. But let's say that you're doing that and you're strong. Let's say you can do 225 pounds on the bench press for 10 reps, doing it that way. And so it is a hard pill to swallow to bring it down to 185 pounds to do it the right way, because you are not proficient at doing it in a mechanically sound way. But mind you, if you actually do that, if you let go of that ego long enough to be able to take the step backwards, you will find that your ceiling of capacity has increased drastically. Though in the beginning, it cost you a little bit of, you got to drop the pride a little bit, because now it's not as sexy putting on, 1 1/4 on there versus those 2 plates. But now all of a sudden you're building on an alignment, a chassis that really has the potential to perform at a greater level. So when you get to 275 for reps on bench press, because now you know what you're doing, that's even more impressive than 225. It's just going to take you taking a step back and really grinding on that skill set. So my big encouragement, my takeaway for you guys on this podcast, on this Savage Talk, is to really look at your movements. And this is not specific to bench press or squats or deadlifts. I mean, strength in itself is, number one, it's relative, right? It's relative, like what is strong for you. It's all a relative concept, but it's also relative to the skill. It's relative to the movement, the modality. You can get strong at the seated row. You can get strong at the bicep curl. You can get strong at the squat, deadlift, cleans, snatches, all the traditional stuff that you think of in strength. But are you actually becoming mechanically proficient? Are you addressing the first layer of this onion, which is just being able to be good at moving through this particular pattern? That would be the thing that I would encourage you to do. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening in. I appreciate you guys. If you like these talks, if you like these podcasts, do me a favor and drop a line letting us know. Give us a thumbs up or comments or feedback or whatever. And we're going to be doing these every single week, so stay tuned. Talk to you later. Bye.